This video is designed for private forest landowners who are considering long-term forest management. We joined Lindbergh Ekela and other resource managers at a property in northeast Minnesota to get a glimpse at the forest management process.
We have approximately 200,000 private forest landowners in Minnesota, and they own about a little over 6 million acres of land. And so that's a pretty significant amount of our forest cover. Minnesota has about 17 million acres of forest. So they are the largest single landowner block that we have in Minnesota of forest lands. So they have a very important aspect in forest management. Provide a lot of benefits to the public. And things like wildlife habitat is very easy to understand that. Forests are very important to keeping our water clean in our lakes and rivers and streams. They're also important for industry and jobs as well as forest recreation. So private forests provide a lot of public benefits as well as benefits to the private family owners that own them. So this process that we've gotten involved in Minnesota with landscape stewardship is we're developing these plans at a watershed basis to try to help provide a better context to the connection between forest and water quality.
Hi, I'm Kyle. I'm a plan writer with the Aitkin Soil and Water Conservation District and write stewardship plans such as the one that was written on this property. As a stewardship plan writer, what we generally do is try to work with the landowner, figure out their goals, what they want out of their property, figuring out what we know with the ecology and forestry aspects, and blend all that together to get the landowner what they're looking for in their property. For example, on the Hughes property, we have their goals of enhancing habitat specifically for grouse and deer, maintain this wonderful network of trails we're seeing here, and basically produce high quality timber in the long run, so get some of that maybe wasn't the highest quality or good genetics out of the woods and cater to the better timber for the long run. So create more value on the landscape overall. And then what I think is a huge part of this, in this specifically this property, is preserving the natural beauty. As we see on the map here, we have 2,500 feet of shoreline, which is almost a half a mile of shoreline. It's really special. And putting this land into this conservation helps protect that water in the long run. And these maps are cut down into cover types, or basically different habitat types. So here we see a huge mixture. We have 11 different types of forest here, ranging from lowland brush, lowland hardwoods, upland hardwoods, aspen, and we'll see all that throughout these trail systems as the whole property is really well connected. And then these stewardship plans also go through a nice comprehensive inventory of what's on the land, what we're seeing for volumes for timber, anything that we're noticing as far as disease or issues that should be managed for, and then some recommendations based on all the data that we've collected in the field, and boil that all down and then try and give those landowners the recommendations that they need to make the best decisions they can to manage their properties.
I'm Steve Hughes, along with my wife Julie. We own this property, and when we purchased it in 2016, we got a forest stewardship plan that Kyle talked about earlier, and then there were some areas here with some very large basswood primarily, but some mature basswood, aspen, and ash, and we decided to have a timber harvest. So one of the first things that you need to think about with a timber harvest is you need access in. If you think about a semi-truck coming back, in this case half a mile back in, they have to have some pretty good roads in order to do that. So we've got some photos here of the highway, and that approach had to be widened so the tractor and the trailer could come in. We had to fix up the driveway a little bit, and we kind of shared that burden with the logger. That's something that you can do, is ask the logger to make your driveway better. That helps you in the long run, helps them in the short term to come in and get the timber out. Our logger was George Hoppia. He did a great job, and he spent a little extra time separating out the bigger product from the smaller, and that got him more money at the mill, and it got us more money when we sold the stumpage to him. So we were happy that he did that. Just a few of the basics as you're getting set up on this timber harvest. I want to talk a little bit about the cost share that we had on the management of this property, mainly on the timber harvest that we did. We worked with the Natural Resources Conservation Service through a program called EQIP, Environmental Quality Incentive Program. And we came up with a plan from the foresters at NRCS, and as well as from Jake Grandforce. The very first year I was fortunate to have a pretty nice buck step out into the cutover. We didn't, at any time we didn't see a reduction in deer. It seems like they like that new growth coming in, and it didn't bother them in the least. I was lucky enough to harvest that buck, and we put him to good use. I want to talk a little bit about stand regeneration. In this property we had some very large basswood, very large aspen, and some ash that were taken out. We also have a system of trails that was put in by a previous landowner, and they were real nice grassy trails, and we didn't want those to be damaged. So we talked with the logger about that and said, you know, keep the trails intact, and any tops and things that were on the trails at the end of the cut, they took those off and put our trails back in good shape.
Slash is a byproduct in almost all timber harvest. It can be utilized in a number of ways. Chipped for trail crossings, can be spread across the land as we see in the timber sale here at Steve's property. Habitat for smaller animals, and can break down and turn back into soil, which helps feed the next generation of plant life. Slash can also be left in piles and offer wildlife habitat. Soil conservationist Dalton Sconson and forester Garrett Christensen from the NRCS explain how soils relate to forest management.
Well, this is kind of a unique site because in Aitkin County it tends to be a little more wetter soils and whatnot, and this was actually a summer harvest that was performed out here, and typically they're doing tree harvest during the winter time to avoid a lot of rutting and destruction of soils and disturbance. And Garrett here, he'll lead you through a little bit on the benefits and differences between the summer and winter harvests.
Yeah, we were really lucky here. The soils weren't too soft and we had a pretty dry summer, so we were able to do the harvest during the summer. And this provides a lot of benefit as far as scarification. You move some of that top grasses and litter to prepare the site bed for seeds of trees like oak, basswood, maples to really get in there and get a chance to grow a little bit without too much competition already preset. And that's just really nice. Not something we do often here in Aitkin County because it's normally a wet county and we have a lot of soft organic soils. So this site kind of gave us a unique opportunity to do that.
Salvaging poor quality trees can be part of your forest management.
I mean, there was a massive oak here that was falling apart. There were big popple that were just falling apart and terrible, kind of like that monster back there with the crooked in it. There was an acre here that was okay for wildlife habitat, I'm sure, but it needed to be regenerated into some younger aspen. So the logger, because he was here, came in, took that popple out. Probably wasn't much value to him. Maybe he got some logs out of it, but it got this regenerating very nicely back into a healthy forest. So that when we do harvest a little more aspen in about 10 years, we're going to have an age class of aspen that's already 12, 13 years old, and going to add some diversity to the wildlife habitat. And these have come in beautifully. This tree must be 11 or 12 feet tall in just that 2 summers.
Jake Grandforce with Pheasants Forever talks about habitat.
Leaving reserve patches, and on some of the main cut you saw the reserves were individual trees across it, mainly the oaks. But here we wanted to leave a kind of a peninsula here of a reserve patch, and I don't know, it comes out to maybe 3-4 acres, but you look throughout here, it's kind of representative of what the stand was. You got ash, basswood, a few big popples in there, which is what he had cut right adjacent here. And this is great for wildlife. It leaves you know, some of the bigger trees that will eventually blow over, or if ideally stay standing snag trees for wildlife. If they blow down, it's great woody debris for wildlife and all the microorganisms, worms, everything else. You know, and just a place to, you know, live and find escape cover coming off the cut, you know, into this reserve patch. These are really important on a harvest, and this is something Steve could have, you know, took a few more dollars off of. Instead, we left this as a reserve patch as part of the harvest, and really good for wildlife.
And don't forget about your neighbors.
Hi, I'm Terry Newgard, Steve's neighbor, and my wife Jean. We live to the west of Steve's property here, and we have 48 acres, and we're concerned about the land management and and what goes on. We've had horror stories of other loggers in our past from where we moved from, and to see how this opens up and actually looks more natural after 2 years than what we expected. It's something that we'd like to consider on our property.
I think might be something we might look into in the future, clearing out some of our woods a little bit.
For more information on forest management, consult your local NRCS office, DNR Forestry, Soil and Water Conservation District, or consulting forester.